December 1944. The dense Ardennes forest lay buried under a crushing silence, the kind that only comes before disaster. Snow clung to the trees like ghostly shrouds, muffling the distant rumble of engines. Deep in this white wilderness, German armored divisions prepared for what Hitler called his final gamble, Operation Wacht am Rhein, the great counteroffensive later remembered as the Battle of the Bulge. At dawn, German tanks rolled forward, their iron tracks groaning under the ice. Panzer crews had been promised one final victory that would turn the tide of the war, a lightning strike through Belgium to split the Allied armies in two and capture Antwerp. But beneath that promise was a truth too grim to hide. The Wehrmacht was running on fumes. Fuel depots were empty. Ammunition was rationed. Soldiers wore mismatched uniforms and boots stolen from fallen men. Even elite SS Panzer units resorted to siphoning gasoline from wrecked American vehicles. Yet in the opening days they surged ahead, seizing small towns like Büllingen, Stavelot, and Stoumont. It was there, amid captured supply trucks and burning villages, that German officers stumbled upon something strange. Inside an American truck were neat, olive-colored cardboard boxes stamped U.S. Army K-Ration. At first they seemed trivial, another trophy of war. But when the officers opened them, what they found inside stunned them. It wasn't gold or advanced weaponry. It was food. Simple, ordinary, yet revolutionary. As one SS officer reportedly remarked, holding the box in disbelief, "If this is how the Americans feed a single soldier, we are finished." That single moment, the tearing open of a ration box, told the entire story of World War II. It revealed the vast machine behind the American war effort, the factories, farms, railroads, and millions of hands that made sure a soldier on a snowy ridge had coffee, chocolate, and cigarettes. In the blinding white silence of the Ardennes forest, it wasn't the sound of artillery or the roar of engines that marked the real turning point. It was the quiet crack of a cardboard seal, the whisper of wax paper, and the realization that Germany's industrial heart had already stopped beating while America's was still running at full power. The officers didn't just taste food that day. They tasted defeat. A defeat baked, canned, and sealed months before the first shot of the battle was fired. When German troops overran the small Belgian town of Büllingen, they found something more valuable than guns or maps. Parked beside a captured American truck convoy were stacks of small olive-green boxes, each one neatly printed with the words, "Meal, K-Ration." To the hungry German soldiers who had been eating black bread and frozen potatoes for days, the boxes looked like treasure. Officers ordered them opened immediately. At first, it seemed almost absurd. These compact boxes looked far too small to sustain a soldier. But as they were opened, one by one, an entire world spilled out. A tin of ham and eggs, a packet of biscuits, instant coffee, chewing gum, chocolate bars, cigarettes, even vitamin tablets. Every detail had been thought out. Every item fit perfectly into its compartment. Everything inside could last for months without spoiling. To the German eye, it was both shocking and humbling. This was war fought not just with bullets, but with efficiency. For the German officers, this box spoke a language more powerful than any propaganda. It told them that the Americans had solved the most difficult problem of modern warfare, feeding an army that spanned continents. Each K-Ration represented a staggering network of production, from the meat packer in Chicago to the machinist stamping tin cans in New Jersey, to the farmer growing oats in Iowa. Every bite was proof of an industrial empire running at full capacity, 24 hours a day. One officer reportedly turned the box over in his hands and muttered, "Every soldier is supplied like an officer." Another couldn't believe the inclusion of luxury items, real coffee and chocolate, when his own men had been issued ersatz substitutes for years. Even the paper packaging impressed them: waterproof, lightweight, easy to carry. In that moment, they saw not just food, but the symbol of organized abundance, a reflection of a country that had outproduced every enemy it faced. Contrast this with their own rations, often moldy, inconsistent, and hastily packed. German field kitchens struggled to reach frontline troops in the snow, and fuel shortages made hot meals nearly impossible. Soldiers often fought hungry, weak, and frostbitten. The Americans, meanwhile, could pull a small box from their packs, light a tiny stove, and eat a warm meal with coffee, anywhere, anytime. The K-ration didn't just feed soldiers, it powered morale. It told every GI that someone back home cared enough to think about his comfort, even in a foxhole. That psychological edge, the sense of being supported by an unstoppable machine, made a difference that no tank or rifle could match. As German officers passed the open boxes among themselves, realization began to sink in. This was not merely about rations. This was about systems, about scale, and about inevitability. The war wasn't going to be lost in the forests of Belgium. It had already been lost in the factories, in the farms, and in the quiet hum of American assembly lines long before the first K-ration reached the front.
The German officers gathered in the dim winter light, their gloved hands clumsy from the cold as they carefully unpacked the K-ration. What they found inside seemed almost surreal for men who had been fighting on starvation rations for months. The wax-sealed tin opened with a faint hiss, releasing a smell that was both foreign and irresistible. The scent of real meat, cooked, seasoned, preserved. Not the gray, watery stew they were used to, but chopped ham and eggs, ready to eat straight from the can. One officer dipped his knife into the tin, tasted, and paused in disbelief. "This," he murmured, "is breakfast." Around him, soldiers tore open packets of biscuits, crisp, dry, perfectly baked. Others found small envelopes labeled Nescafé, instant coffee, and tiny sugar cubes neatly wrapped. Some sniffed the chocolate bar, the scent of cocoa evoking a memory of peacetime. And then came the cigarettes, Camels and Lucky Strikes, real tobacco, smooth and strong. Each item told a silent story. The K-ration wasn't just food, it was a promise to every American soldier that no matter where he fought, the nation would reach him. Even in the mud and snow, America delivered a piece of home. Every tin, every stick of gum was a message: you are not forgotten. For the Germans, the realization was brutal. Their own supply system was collapsing under the weight of blockade and bombardment. Rail lines were shattered, depots empty, and food production crippled by years of war. Soldiers often scavenged, killing farm animals or sharing a single loaf among 10 men. But here, in this small American box, was proof of something terrifying: an enemy that could feed, clothe, and arm millions without pause. They noticed the precision of it all: the labels, the portion control, even the calorie balance, everything engineered for endurance. It wasn't luxury, it was logistics made perfect. To a professional soldier, that level of preparation revealed an opponent not just rich, but relentlessly efficient. One German lieutenant wrote later that opening a K-ration felt like peering into the soul of a machine that never tires. Some officers tried to rationalize it. They said, "Of course the Americans are industrial." But inside, many understood what it truly meant. Germany had no future in a war of production. Their courage, discipline, and tactical brilliance meant little when the enemy could replace everything: a tank, a plane, a man, faster than they could destroy it. That evening, as the snow thickened and the fires burned low, a strange silence fell over the men. They sat around the open boxes, eating slowly, thoughtfully. For a moment the war felt far away. The warmth of real food in their mouths only deepened the chill of realization in their hearts. They hadn't just opened a meal, they had opened a mirror, and what they saw reflected back was the truth they could no longer deny. The war was already lost, and the proof was sitting right there, neatly packed in cardboard and tin.
By late 1944, German officers no longer needed to read Allied propaganda to understand how dire their situation was. The evidence surrounded them, in the skies above, in the endless streams of American trucks, and now even in a simple box of rations. The K-ration had revealed more than a meal. It had exposed the terrifying reality of industrial supremacy. The Americans weren't just fighting with bravery, they were fighting with factories. While Germany's war machine strained under shortages, the United States had become an unstoppable production titan. In Detroit, car plants that once built family sedans now rolled out tanks by the thousands. In California, aircraft factories turned out bombers faster than the Luftwaffe could shoot them down. Even as the Battle of the Bulge raged, American assembly lines ran day and night, flooding Europe with supplies: food, ammunition, fuel, boots, blankets, and medicine. The K-ration was simply the frontline symbol of that unimaginable scale. For German officers trained in the Prussian tradition of warfare, discipline, precision, and tactical brilliance, this was a new kind of enemy. America's power didn't depend on territory or conquests. It flowed from systems, infrastructure, and organization. Every GI carrying a K-ration was backed by a nation that could produce more in a single week than Germany could in a month. Even the logistics behind getting that box from a Chicago warehouse to a foxhole in Belgium represented a feat Germany could never replicate under constant bombing and blockade. Inside the German command circles, the mood had shifted from defiance to grim recognition. Intelligence reports confirmed what many had already feared. The Allies' industrial output dwarfed the Reich's tenfold. The U.S. alone had produced nearly 300,000 aircraft, over 100,000 tanks, and billions of rounds of ammunition. The Luftwaffe's finest aces and Panzer divisions could no longer turn the tide when their replacements had no fuel, no steel, and no food. Even Hitler's speeches about wonder weapons, the V-2 rockets, jet fighters, and new tanks, rang hollow. These innovations could not change the arithmetic of war. A single American factory could replace every tank lost in an entire battle. A single convoy across the Atlantic could replenish what the Wehrmacht had consumed in a month of fighting. To the Germans who examined those K-rations, it became painfully clear: America had mechanized war itself. For the German soldier on the front lines, it was demoralizing. They fought with courage and skill, yet the enemy seemed inexhaustible, well-fed, well-equipped, and relentlessly supplied. Even as the Allies suffered losses, their capacity to rebuild made every German victory fleeting. The Wehrmacht's valor could not compete with the United States assembly lines. By the time those K-rations appeared on the snow-covered roads of Belgium, they were no longer just food boxes. They were symbols of destiny. Germany had entered a war it could never win, not because its soldiers lacked courage, but because its factories lacked fuel, its trains lacked steel, and its people lacked time. The Americans didn't just bring men to Europe. They brought industry itself, wrapped neatly in cardboard, sealed in tin, and stamped U.S. Army.
As the German officers finished examining the American K-rations, A strange quietness settled among them. It wasn't the silence of respect. It was the silence of realization. What they had just witnessed inside that simple olive-green box wasn't just a clever piece of military logistics. It was a message from the future, a taste of a world they could no longer reach. For years, Nazi propaganda had painted the Americans as soft, lazy, and undisciplined. Yet here in the frozen forests of Belgium, the truth sat in their hands, neat, efficient, and undeniably powerful. Each item told a story of superiority that had nothing to do with arrogance and everything to do with organization. The Americans had mastered the art of turning comfort into combat power. A soldier who could eat well, sleep warm, and drink coffee on the front line would fight longer, think clearer, and move faster. The K-ration was more than nutrition. It was psychological warfare in its purest form. It told every German soldier who opened it, "We have more, we have better, and we are not stopping." For the officers, it was a devastating symbol. They could no longer deny that the Americans had turned industry into a weapon more deadly than any bomb or bullet. Every can of meat represented a functioning factory. Every pack of cigarettes represented a functioning supply chain. Every chocolate bar represented a morale system that stretched from the heart of America to the battlefields of Europe. Germany's dream of empire had been beaten not by ideology, but by efficiency. Many soldiers secretly compared the K-rations to their own meager supplies, often frozen bread, watery soup, or the occasional thin slice of sausage. They thought about their families back home, struggling with food shortages, living under constant bombardment, while across the ocean, American cities thrived untouched, pouring out endless ships and supplies. The war, they began to understand, wasn't just being lost on the battlefield. It had been lost in the factories, the farms, and the minds of planners who understood that an army marches on logistics. As they repacked the boxes, some German officers ordered the rations distributed to their men, knowing full well it was a bitter irony to feed their soldiers with the food of their enemy. Others kept a box or a label as a grim souvenir, a reminder of the day they realized that bravery alone couldn't defeat abundance. That night, as they camped under the dim glow of a dying fire, some of them ate quietly from those American tins, tasting not just food, but inevitability. The rich flavor of ham and eggs wasn't just nourishment. It was the unmistakable taste of defeat. The K-ration became, in its own quiet way, a monument, not to destruction, but to organization, scale, and foresight. And as German soldiers trudged through the snow, hungry and cold, they understood a truth far deeper than any military report could capture. The Americans hadn't just brought war to Europe. They had brought an entire civilization that knew how to sustain it. And that was when the Germans knew they had already lost.